This is Lesson 28, Translating Ordinary Statements. In the last lesson, we looked at immediate inferences, which are forms of equivalent statements. And that was really our first lesson in translating ordinary English into logical statements that we can analyze. Obviously, that's useful because in ordinary language, people use negatives in the way we talked about last lesson. We're going to go deeper into translating ordinary statements, and a lot of these will sound a little more like the conversations you hear every day, more than the immediate inferences that the last lesson did. I want to start with a little review of proper categorical form that we've already covered so far in this course. Consider first that categorical form requires that you change verbs into nouns. So take the statement, all roads lead to Rome. The lead is the main verb and it needs to turn into a noun. So your final statement needs to be something like, all roads are to Rome leaders, or simply, all roads are roads that lead to Rome. Similarly, we know that categorical form requires that adjectives also be turned into nouns. The predicate has to be a noun, and so all toads are ugly is not strictly speaking categorical form. It needs to be something like all toads are ugly amphibians or all toads are ugly unkissed princes. Third, we must recognize synonyms for all, no, or some, and you've seen several of those already. Sometimes statements that start with every are universal affirmative statements. Same thing for any or as many as. Those can all be synonyms for all. For no, statements that start with none are universal negatives. Sometimes all ... not type statements are universal negatives, and never is also a word that tells you need to translate a statement as a universal negative. Then some can be a translation for many or most or a few. This last one is interesting. Some S are not P. We recognize that as the contradiction of all S are P, and so some S are not P is a proper translation of a not all S are P type statement. So let's do some practice translating some different kinds of normal English statements into categorical form. Take the statement, everybody needs a friend. It's a universal affirmative statement. You can translate it as, all people are friend needers. In the statement, any number 2 pencil will work, that any is also a word that introduces a universal affirmative and could properly be translated as, all number 2 pencils are acceptable pencils. As many as saw the accident may testify. Here again, as many as is a universal affirmative identifier. And so as many as saw the accident means all witnesses of the accident or all accident witnesses are people who may testify. Then for universal negatives, none is an identifier. None of the songs I heard were copyrighted could simply be translated as no songs I heard were copyrighted songs. Let's keep going. All of the pianos in that room are not in tune. If all of the pianos are not in tune, that means none of the pianos in the room are in tune, or no pianos in that room are in tune instruments. We have the universal negative identifier all ... not. The subject in that sentence was a noun. We have a to be verb, and then the predicate is also a noun. How about toddlers never study calculus? The never here introduces another universal negative, so we get something like no toddlers are calculus students, or no toddlers are studiers of calculus. Many soldiers visited the memorial. Here, many is a particular affirmative or a particular identifier. So many soldiers visited the memorial would become some soldiers were memorial visitors. Most people like ice cream is, of course, some people are ice cream likers. A few people like spinach. Some people are spinach likers. Then, not all the soldiers fight on the front lines. If the statement was simply all of the soldiers fight on the front lines, it would be all soldiers are front-line fighters. That not negates it, though, turns it into its contradiction, and so it actually becomes some soldiers are not front-line fighters. Remember, technically, in logic class, not all soldiers fight on the front lines does not mean that some soldiers do fight on the front lines. So that's how we translate statements into categorical form. We've seen those kind of examples already, but let's take a look at some new types of statements, starting with singular statements. Singular statements are statements that refer to a single noun, a single person, place, thing, or idea. So if you have a statement like, John is a mailman, how are you going to translate John is a mailman into categorical form? Is it some John, all of John, some person? I actually want to give you a rule to remember. Translate singular statements as universals. Though it sounds strange, in order to make it work logically, the statement needs to be translated as all John is a mailman. That's what we do with singular statements. We simply take the singular subject and make it universal. All John. You can do it for negatives as well. When the Lord said to Israel, "You are not my people," it means the same sort of thing as "No, you are my people." Or you can even talk about it individually. If you say, "I'm tired," use all I am a tired person. Remember that am is another of our verbs of being. All I am a tired person. As I said, it sounds a bit strange, but it will help us to understand how to analyze arguments that use statements like that. So, translate singular statements as universals. Second, you can have indefinite statements. Like singular statements, indefinite statements also are missing a quantifier. They don't have an all or no or some. But the rule with indefinites is that you need to consider the context. Some indefinite statements get translated as universals. Some get translated as particulars, and it really is just the context and your familiarity with ordinary language that tells you which way to translate it. So, for example, if the statement, "Wiener dogs ate my homework," showed up in an argument, how would you translate that? Would that be, "All wiener dogs are eaters of my homework"? Probably not. Probably only a few wiener dogs were involved in this heinous incident. So it's better to translate that as "Some wiener dogs were eaters of my homework." That's because the person who is saying "wiener dogs ate my homework" probably means that only a few of those dogs were involved. This indefinite statement would be best translated as a particular. Now, say you had a statement like, "Cats are mammals." We know that cats are mammals just by the context. It's talking about all of them. So cats are mammals would become the statement, "All cats are mammals." It's true about all of them. But what about "Cats sing outside my window"? Well, there probably, again, were only some cats outside your window singing, not all the cats in the world. So you would translate that indefinite statement as, "Some cats were outside my window singers." Notice both of those statements started with the word cats, but one of them was translated as a universal and one of them as a particular. It's the context that tells you how to do that. So let's make this into an argument. Cats are mammals and cats sing outside my window, therefore mammals sing outside my window. Is that going to be universal or particular? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that it should be a particular. Some mammals were outside my window singers, because that's a valid conclusion from those premises. It would be invalid if you said all mammals, every mammal in the world, was singing outside my window. So with the indefinite statements, it is the context, recognizing how the words are being used in the sentence and what the sentence is supposed to mean, that is necessary for determining how to translate those indefinite statements as universals or particulars. All right, finally, hypothetical statements. Hypothetical statements are if ... then type statements. Now, in a few lessons, we'll be going into more detail with hypothetical syllogisms and hypothetical arguments. But now, just looking at how we can translate if ... then statements, the general rule you need to remember is to translate hypothetical statements as universals. So, for example, if you like chocolate, then you will love this cake, is a sentence you might hear in ordinary conversation. You would translate that as a universal affirmative. All chocolate likers will be lovers of this cake. So you have an if S then P type statement that becomes sort of an all S is P categorical translation. It can work for negatives as well. If it's a hard test, then I will not pass would be a universal negative. No hard test is a test that I will pass. But in both cases, whether affirmative or negative, we translate the if then as a universal statement. Okay. In summary, singular statements refer to a single person, place, or thing, and the perhaps counterintuitive rule is to translate singular statements as universals. Secondly, indefinite statements are statements that are missing the quantifier, and you want to translate them as universals or particulars depending upon the context of those statements. You want to make sure that you are understanding what the sentence means in ordinary English, and that will give you clues as to whether you should translate them as universals or as particulars. Then third, hypothetical statements if ... then type statements become universals. Now, in exercise 28, you're going to be just translating individual statements. So use the same sort of rules that we've considered in this lesson. Take a look at number 4. Not everybody will come. There's a couple different things that you have to do here. You have to recognize that everybody is a universal type statement, something like all people. But then that not in front of it will go to the contradiction of it. And so that will be some people are not, or some people will not be. Proceed with translation in that way. Look at number 5 as well. A soft answer turns away wrath. This is one of the proverbs. You have to consider when Solomon says, a soft answer turns away wrath. Is he talking about all soft answers, or is he talking about some? Is it a guarantee of a universal, or is it a probability of a particular? On that questioning note, I'll leave you to it.